Okay, so it's Wednesday, the 24th of February, and today we're looking at can I use fronted adverbials? So very quickly, first, if you could just pause the video and tell me where do the commas go in these sentences? Okay, so we've got later that night, Julia woke up with a start. Beyond the horizon, another land of wonders lay. With shaking hands, Max picked up the sword. Unfortunately, the parcel wasn't delivered until Saturday. And climbing up the rope, she felt a strange stabbing pain in her side. So the commas go. They're all fronted adverbials, essentially. So they're all a short phrase at the beginning that tells you when, where, or how something happened, and it needs a comma after it. So it should go here. So we've got later that night, comma. That tells you when it happened. Beyond the horizon, comma. That's where it happened. With shaking hands, comma. That's how that sentence happened. Unfortunately, that's how as well. And climbing up the rope, and that's kind of like how and where, isn't it? Comma. So there's where your comma should go. Also, if you put a comma in between strange and stabbing, that's also absolutely fine there between the two adjectives there. You could put a comma there. That's absolutely fine too. Okay, so today we are just we're coming back to where we were in our diary entry. So we've done like 2 days of sort of living through a strange day in our lives that we can put into a diary entry. So far, you found a strange shop. You've gone into the shop. You looked at all the strange items. On Monday, we came up with all those weird items you found as you were looking around the shop and where they were in the shop. Yesterday, we decided an item that we had found. We paid for it somehow, or we left a coin or something like that. And we went out into the street and we found on our way to school or on our way to the park that it had strange magical powers, which meant that, well, you tell me, there were lots of things you wrote yesterday, lots of things you thought, what did it mean, these magical powers that it gave me? What did that enable me to do on my way to the park or on my way to school? And we didn't think it was always going to be positive things. We thought that sometimes there might be strange consequences as well. But the next thing that happens is, whilst you're busy playing around with your magical powers, things start to go wrong. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at today. Something starts to go wrong. So how could it go wrong? That might be our first question to think about, really, because you kind of think, well, if you're invisible and you can turn invisible, or if you've got superhuman strength, how can that go wrong? Like, surely it's a good thing. How could it possibly go wrong? Well, that's what we're going to think about. So I've got 6 options here. Hopefully this covers most of your magical powers you came up with. If it doesn't, don't worry. I'm sure you can think of a way that yours could go wrong too. But just want you to pause the video and don't write them down necessarily. Just in your head, or if you've got someone next to you, just talk to them about these 6 things. So out of those 6 things, what do you reckon could actually go wrong with these powers? Then it's completely up to you, but pause the video and have a think. Okay, so hopefully you had thought about that. So this is what I thought. Obviously, you may have totally different ideas, but it doesn't, there's no real sort of guidelines here. There's no real boundaries. It's up to you what you think could go wrong. This is what I've put. So maybe if you're invisible, suddenly the power stops and you're invisible and you can't become visible again. That might start to go wrong. Maybe you have superhuman strength, but suddenly, maybe like, for some reason, it's borrowed all of your strength from the future to make you superhuman at one point, and then you suddenly start getting weaker and weaker and weaker until you suddenly realize you're far weaker than you ever used to be before this magical power. Maybe if you can fly, you suddenly lose that ability, but you're perched up somewhere really, really high, like on top of a church steeple or something, and then you suddenly realize, oh, I can't fly anymore. That could be a problem. Maybe you can shoot far from your fingertips at will, but then suddenly everything you touch starts to burn, whether you like it or not. That might start to be a problem. Maybe you can read people's minds, but then suddenly that power goes and you suddenly realize that they can realize your thoughts and they can read your thoughts. And maybe if you run at superhuman speed, like maybe that's the same as a strength one, maybe you suddenly get slower and slower and slower until you realize you're almost turned to stone and you can barely move, even moving so slowly. So maybe you can use one of those. If not, use one of the ideas you came up with. I'll let you pause it if you need to now. Just whatever your magical power is, just to have a think, right, how could mine go wrong? What could happen wrong with my one? Okay, otherwise, what we're going to do now is we're going to write a short sequence of ideas and we're going to use a fronted adverbial for each one. So I'm not going to go through massively what a fronted adverbial is. We've done loads of that, but it's just a little bit. You need a comma after it, and it just shows you when, where, or how something happened. So I'm going to write a short sequence of ideas, just going through maybe 6 sort of sentences about what's going to be going through your mind. So this is what I came up with. The one I've done is for superhuman strength. So the one I wrote yesterday, imagine that goes wrong. So my first sentence, I'm going to start with suddenly is my fronted adverbial, and I'm going to suddenly, what's going to happen? How am I going to know these powers are coming to an end or they're going wrong? I'm going to have a strange feeling. So I'm not going to say too much in this first sentence. So suddenly I've had a strange feeling wash over me. And then I'm going to realize what it is that's going wrong. So I'm going to start with a few seconds later, and then we're going to go with what's actually happening. So I could feel my strength fading away. Unfortunately, is the next bit. So obviously, if my strength just faded and went back to normal, that wouldn't necessarily be terrible. We'd just be like, oh, well, that was fun, and I'll carry on with my day. But unfortunately, this is now where I realize it's actually a really bad thing, because I kept getting weaker and weaker. And now I'm going to start to explain more about that. So I'm going to say, feeling scared, I realized I couldn't even pick up a stone. And then I'm going to think, well, I'm going to look around for some help. So I was here with shaking hands. I looked desperately around for help. And then my final thing is going to be, all of a sudden, I knew I had to get rid of the whatever object it was. I've got to get rid of this magical object because it's gone wrong, isn't it? It's cursed or something, isn't it? So here's kind of a sequence. I've got 6 things. The first one is having that strange feeling. The second one is describing, well, what is going wrong? The third one is like, well, why is that so bad? Why is losing my ability so bad? Then it's going to be 2 one about feeling scared and realizing what exactly the problem is. Then with shaking hands, you're still scared. You're looking around for help. And then finally, your last sentence is going to be knowing that you had to get rid of whatever it was. I'm going to show you this 2 more times. Now, the next time I'm going to show you is going to be exactly the same fronted adverbials, but I'm going to look at it for a different magical power. So imagine you turned invisible. Let's see how this could go wrong. So once again, I've got suddenly, I've had a strange feeling wash over me. So I'm going to keep that exactly the same. Then I'm going to put a few seconds later, I could feel my powers draining. So that's what's happening. And what is the strange feeling? Oh, my powers are going away. That's my second sentence. Third one is going to be, unfortunately, why is this so bad? Well, unfortunately, I didn't have the strength to make myself visible again. So now I'm going to be a bit scared. I'm going to realize the consequences. So I'm going to say, feeling scared, I realized I was going to be stuck being invisible forever. Now I'm going to find out some help. I'm going to look around for help. So I'm going to have, with shaking hands, I look desperately around for help, but no one can see or hear me. And then finally, I'm going to keep exactly the same for the last one. All of a sudden, I knew I had to get rid of the whatever it might be you need to get rid of. So there, I've kept my fronted adverbials the same. And of course, you can use any of my ideas from this whole PowerPoint. As always, you can use any of the ideas. But I've kept my fronted adverbials the same. And I've kept some things the same, but obviously it's slightly different because I'm talking about invisibility rather than superhuman strength. So I've got strange feeling again at the beginning. Then you can feel your powers going away. Then what's the problem with that? And then you realize something more, what's really scaring you about this. Then you're looking around for help. And then finally, you're knowing that you have to get rid of this. The last time I'm going to show you this, I'm going to go back to the super strength one. But I'm going to change the fronted adverbials and just show you that you don't have to use those fronted adverbials. You can keep it exactly the same ideas, but you can use a range of different ones. So this time I've put turning the corner. I've had a strange feeling wash over me. So I might have where I am as this happens. Moments later, I could feel my strength fading. So you could use that one. Rather than unfortunately, I could use to my horror. I kept getting weaker and weaker. And then rather than, what's the next one? Is it feeling scared? So rather than feeling scared, I could put, wrong way. I could put in terror. I realized I couldn't even pick up a stone. Rather than shaking hands, I could, with shaking hands, I could change it to breathing heavily. I look desperately around for help, or maybe sweating, or you're getting really scared now, or whatever it might be, with a shiver down my spine. And then finally, rather than just all of a sudden, I could put in a moment of inspiration. I changed that from in a light bulb moment, but you could have both of those. In a moment of inspiration, I knew I had to get rid of the whatever it is. So the task for today is to write a little bit like that. If you want to underline the frontal adverbials or write them in a different color, that would be great, just so you could really see that you've got one at the beginning of each sentence and remembering that comma as well. But you have got 6 sentences like that, following that structure of when things are going wrong. And tomorrow, we're going to look at how you're going to get rid of whatever this magical item is to hopefully save yourselves from this terrible curse.